God said, "I will bring that third part through the fire. I will refine them as silver is refined, and I will test them as gold is tested. They will call on my name, and I will answer them. I will say, 'They are my people,' and they will say, 'The Lord is my God.'" Zechariah 13:9. "See, I've refined you, but not as silver. I've tested you in the furnace of affliction." Isaiah 48:10. And also, in the first letter of Peter, chapter 5, verse 10, "The God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, establish, strengthen, and settle you after you have suffered a little while." From God's words in the scriptures, we can see that God allows hardships and refinement to come upon us. Within them lies God's will, is entirely for our cleansing and salvation, the most precious treasure God grants us. Before trials and refinements come, we often think of ourselves as those who follow God's way. Some even believe they have sacrificed and dedicated themselves wholly to God, worked hard, endured suffering, paid a price, cared most for God's will, loved Him most, and remained most faithful. They think, even if others grow weak, negative, or betray God, I will never betray Him. But in reality, when our work meets obstacles, when life becomes difficult, when we encounter various troubles, we begin to complain against God, lose faith, and may even no longer want to offer ourselves to Him. When our family suffers misfortune or disasters strike, we may resent God for our personal loss, argue with Him, oppose Him, and in more serious cases, even betray and stop believing in Him. God has repeatedly required us to walk in His way and commanded, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind." Is 22:37. Yet we continually calculate for our own benefit, valuing worldly gain more than loving God. When what God does aligns with our notions, we give thanks and praise. But when it contradicts our expectations, we misunderstand, complain, or even turn against Him. This shows how deeply corrupted by Satan we are. Believing in God while always seeking blessings is essentially bargaining with Him. It is utterly selfish and base, completely lacking reason. Only through trials do we come to truly recognize our satanic nature of rebellion and opposition toward God. We gain discernment over our mistaken intentions and faith, and realize how far our way of living falls from God's requirements. We see that we are unworthy to receive His grace and promises. At the same time, such hardships allow us to sense God's holiness and righteousness. Our faith is mixed with selfish motives. If we continue pursuing God only for blessings, He will surely abhor and reject us in trials. When our corruption and weaknesses are exposed, we are driven to pray, seek God's words, reflect on what within us opposes His will, and strive to satisfy Him and bear testimony for Him. Gradually, our relationship with God grows closer. After such experiences, not only do we gain deeper knowledge of ourselves, but also some understanding of God's disposition. We become more mature and steadfast. Certain arrogant, deceitful traits in us may even change. Thus, though trials bring temporary suffering to the flesh, their result is salvation and purification. Hardship and refinement bring the greatest benefit and edification to our spiritual life. Moreover, from the experiences of the saints before us, we see this truth. Before God used Moses, He first trained him in the wilderness for 40 years. That time, Moses endured harsh conditions, loneliness, wild beasts, severe weather, and constant threats to his life. Surely, he suffered greatly. Some may ask, why didn't God simply use Moses directly? Why subject him to 40 years in the wilderness? Within this lay God's goodwill. Moses' temperament was straightforward, inclined to act on impulse. When he saw an Egyptian striking an Israelite, he killed the Egyptian on the spot. Such natural impulsiveness and heroic temper did not accord with God's will. If God had used Moses as he was, Moses might have relied on his own strength and temper, thereby hindering God's work. He could never have fulfilled God's commission of leading Israel out of Egypt. Thus, God placed Moses in the wilderness for 40 years to shape him into a vessel fit for use in that harsh environment. Moses continually prayed and called upon God, witnessed his sovereignty and providence, and depended on him for survival. Over time, his natural strength and impulsiveness were worn away. He developed true faith and obedience to God. So when God finally called him to lead Israel out of Egypt, Moses did not resist, but accepted and obeyed. Under God's guidance, he completed the commission successfully. We also see this in Job's experience. When trials came, his wealth was stolen. His children perished, and his body was covered with sores. Though he suffered greatly, Job did not sin with his lips, nor speak against God. Instead, he accepted all things as coming from God and sought his will within them. He declared, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Job 1:21. Shall we accept good from God and not accept adversity? Job 2:10. Relying on faith, reverence, and obedience, Job bore witness to God. He knew that all he possessed, wealth, children, was given by God, and that God had the right to take them away. As a created being, he chose unconditional submission to the Creator. Thus, Job stood firm. Later, God appeared to him in the whirlwind. Job heard God's own voice and saw his form. He gained a true knowledge of God, something impossible in times of ease. This was the greatest blessing hidden within his trials. Afterward, Job said, "When he has tested me, I shall come forth as pure gold." Job 23:10. From this, we see that trials and refinement are, in fact, God's truest and most practical love for us. It is through hardships and testing that we receive God's cleansing and salvation, becoming people who align with His will. Is why God permits suffering and refinement to come upon us.